The war in Iran is exposing a new front in modern conflict: artificial intelligence in warfare. The U.S. military has reportedly used advanced AI tools to support intelligence and operations, and it's prompted pushback from some tech companies, a clash between AI firm Anthropic and the Pentagon, and fresh debate about the ethics of military partnerships. Toni Waterman reports for CNA from Washington, D.C.
As the U.S. unleashes traditional warfare on Iran, there's cutting-edge technology said to be quietly operating in the shadows: artificial intelligence.
We've got a lot of autonomous systems, or systems that drones and others incorporated with smart AI aspects to them, but a lot of which I can't talk about here.
While U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth dodged the question, news reports say the U.S. is using Anthropic's Claude family of AI tools, large language models similar to OpenAI's ChatGPT and Google's Gemini. It's unclear exactly how the technology is being employed, but since 2024, the U.S. military has used Claude for intelligence assessments, target identification, and battlefield simulations, mostly in tandem with Palantir, a controversial American software company specializing in AI-driven decision-making for the government. Michael Horowitz is the former director of the Emerging Capabilities Policy Office at the Pentagon.
My guess is that a Central Command is using something like Palantir's Maven Smart System platform to try to get a better understanding of the battle space and figure out what's happening, what targets they're hitting, what the impact of those strikes might have been, et cetera.
Claude technology was also reportedly used during January's U.S. military operation to capture former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, a move that prompted questions from Anthropic about how its AI was deployed. The company says it will not allow Claude to be used for mass surveillance of Americans or for fully autonomous weapons. But the Pentagon insists any AI it uses must be available for all lawful purposes, with the president declaring that no company will dictate how the U.S. military fights and wins wars.
If you work for Raytheon or Northrop Grumman or Lockheed Martin, you know that you're in the business of working for the Pentagon, pretty much. And what's different here is that these are civilian technologies that have been developed for civilian use that are now getting appropriated for military purposes. And that's where that tension lies.
After Anthropic refused to capitulate, the Trump administration designated it a national security risk, an unprecedented move that has exposed an ethical fault line in who decides how AI is used in battle, at a time when the technology is revolutionizing warfare. AI's ability to rapidly process vast amounts of data can accelerate today's decision-making into hyper-war speeds tomorrow. Drones and weapons are moving towards self-navigation, and AI can also generate high-volume, personalized, and realistic propaganda.
These models aren't yet perfect. And so if they hallucinate or give a sort of inaccurate output, and now those are being used for decisions about life and death.
According to reports, the Pentagon and Anthropic are back at the negotiating table. But experts say the tech company's blacklisting could send a chill across the AI sector, disadvantaging the U.S. amid a global AI arms race.
The real winner, if the Pentagon and Anthropic can't figure it out, is China, because that would mean that American national defense has been deprived of the talent, the expertise, and the technology of one of the leading AI companies in the world.
Partnerships between private AI companies and the government are increasingly essential for national security, especially as global powers pour billions of dollars into AI-driven weapons systems and battlefield analytics. Any breakdown in trust is a major risk, with companies now forced to confront how much control they're willing or able to give up to the government. For CNA, I'm Toni Waterman in Washington, D.C.
Well, for more, we have Allan Behm joining us. He is Senior Advisor of the International and Security Program at Australia Institute. Allan, so we're hearing that AI is being used to analyze vast amounts of battlefield data and support targeting decisions. Where should the line be drawn between machine assistance and human decision-making in matter of life and death?
I think, Ella, that a human being must always be in the loop, because there are always going to be moral questions and ethical questions that have got to be decided. Sometimes these are dilemmas where you will have one ethical issue pitched against another, and you have to make a choice. And if you concede the making of that choice to a machine, then you have simply turned warfare into something which is out of human control. And that, I think, is about the most dangerous way of conducting any sort of enterprise that deals with the lives of human beings. So the man or the person must be in the loop.
Right. And why exactly do you think that the Pentagon and Anthropic fallout recently? What happens when a private AI company tries to place limits on how its own technology is used in warfare? Who ultimately decides?
That's a really terrific question, and that's just being worked out at the moment, I think. It's clear that the Pentagon and perhaps Hegseth and Trump have a clear preference that technology should dominate the battle space, that they can step back and so long as you feed all of the data into the technological decision-making system and have the confidence of your systems providers that they think that the system works, then you just let it go and let it make the decisions. You will certainly get the decisions made quickly and they will be executed efficiently. But whether the outcome fits the strategic purpose of warfare, and we must remember that warfare is both the heights and the depths of human behaviour. And if it falls outside human behaviour, then we have a situation where the consequences bear no human responsibility or culpability. And this, I think, is a very, very dangerous departure from the way in which the human race has conducted warfare and indeed affairs more generally, since forever, really.
And if trust between the Pentagon and top AI firms breaks down, does China come out ahead? And what does that really say about how the US is managing its AI arms race?
Look, it's easy to say that China comes out ahead, but China has got exactly the same problem as the United States and anybody else who has the capacity to deploy autonomous systems. What I mean there is that President Xi and the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China, they want to be in charge of what happens as much as any other leadership in the world. So they're confronted with exactly the same problem. You know, it's a self-indulgence of many of us in the West who consider that we, for some reason, have moral superiority and that other countries like China or whatever else don't enjoy that. I mean, China is a Confucian society. It knows perfectly well what the moral consequences and ethical consequences are of government action and government decision. So nobody wins out of this, Ella. Everybody's in the same position, and whoever makes the wrong choice first is legitimising a similar wrong choice to be made by everybody else. And that's the calculus, I think, that the United States has really got to think through at the moment.
But you know, Allan, how is an AI company really different from, say, traditional defense contractors like Lockheed Martin or Boeing? Can you work with the Pentagon and then expect the military to accept limits on how they can deploy your technology?
That is why we have parliaments. It's why we have the Congress. It's why we have the courts. It's why we have law. And I think what you're finding in some of the AI companies a sensitivity to the fact that they want to be able to tell their shareholders, they want to be able to tell their government that they are acting fully in accordance with the law and that the law must protect human lives as well as being able to protect the interests of the state. And now that is a tension in policy making, and it is why we elect our governments. And all governments are faced with the same thing, because all governments have got highly advanced technical systems. We use them in our taxation systems, we use them in our law enforcement systems. But central to the way in which modern societies operate, that is, societies that are not barbaric anymore, is that they will protect the lives and well-being of their citizens. And that, I think, is the tension we're seeing playing out between the war fighters, whose business is to kill and to win wars, and those who are elected governors, whose business it is to protect the people whom they are defending, and indeed the people whom they are attacking. Because under the Geneva Conventions, of course, we have responsibilities for adversaries as well as responsibilities for ourselves.
And how far do you think are we from the day an AI-controlled drone or a plane or a robot can locate, identify, and even destroy enemy targets autonomously? From an ethical perspective, who is accountable if an AI-enabled system makes a lethal mistake?
I don't think we know the answer to that yet, Ella. I think the day is pretty well here where autonomous systems can do things. They don't really take decisions. They act in the terms of the way in which they're programmed. But we're very close to the point where a machine will be able to make a choice between two alternatives within the same program. In other words, they can problem solve. And when that happens, and when human beings are no longer there, we no longer know who is really accountable. We can say, I suppose, that the owner of the system is accountable because they have vicarious liability. Well, let's see if that ever works in a court. I think that the UN and other bodies have got to address this as soon as they can before the cat gets out of the bag, so to speak. They've got to address it as soon as they can to bring moral clarity to the way in which we conduct warfare. The human race has done this before. It's why we do have the Geneva Conventions, and we've had 150 years of experience with that. It's why we have the UN Charter. We formed that in 1945, and in the years after that, we have to come back and think through what is the legal foundation for the way in which we conduct modern warfare.
Yeah, and you know, both the war on Iran and the Russia-Ukraine conflict have seen AI-generated videos and misinformation and spreading online. How much is AI now shaping not just fighting itself, but also how the world understands these wars?
That is another fantastic question, Ella, and the AI is shaping it. I mean, let's make no mistake about it. We're getting images and pictures so quickly that they can't have been managed by human interlocutors, that the pictures come virtually straight away. I mean, certainly on our television sets in the Southern Hemisphere in the last 24 hours, we've seen footage from USS Minnesota sinking an Iranian frigate off Sri Lanka. That footage was available almost immediately that event happened. That was all done automatically and autonomously. The point I think that we're discussing is, if that decision to sink that Iranian frigate was taken by a machine, then we are in real trouble, because even President Trump is not in charge of that. And it is a big step, I think, for unrestricted warfare in a non-declared war zone, in a non-declared war, suddenly to find itself out there in the Indian Ocean. It's a big step. And that is precisely why we cannot rely on AI to make our choices for us and to execute our decisions. Human beings, under the authority of the elected government or the appointed government, have to be the people who make the choices. And that, I think, is what the private companies are trying to deal with, because there are fundamental issues of law there, national law and, of course, humanitarian law.
Well, thank you so much for answering all our questions and sharing your insights. Allan Behm, Senior Advisor of the International and Security Affairs Program at Australia Institute.